Good morning, everyone. My name is Nivedita Shekhawat, and I'm a student in MSc Counseling program at Bangor University. Today, I want to start with something really simple. Think about the last time you had a meal. Were you fully present, or was there a screen in front of you? My research is called The Comfort of the Screen, and it explores the emotional and social effects of watching content while eating. Over the next 20 minutes, I will be sharing what we found and why this matters for counseling practice. So let me start with a bit of context. How many of us reached for a phone during a meal today? Probably most of us. And that's exactly my point. Ofcom found in 2022 that most UK adults engage with digital media during at least one meal every single day. It's not a niche behavior. It's become a part of how we eat. And yet, we know surprisingly little about what it actually does to us psychologically. What makes this particularly fascinating is that eating has never just been about food. Sharing a meal is one of the humanity's oldest social rituals. It is how we connect, belong, and build community. Screens are now sitting at the table with us. So what does that actually feel like for people? That's what this research set out to explore through the three psychological constructs central to counseling: loneliness, mental well-being, and social connectedness. Now, before I get into the study, let me share the four theories that helped shape our thinking. The first, social surrogacy, the idea that when we feel lonely, we turn to media to fill the gap, that watching something while eating alone can genuinely make us feel less alone. The second, media equation theory. This is the one that I find really fascinating. It suggests that on some level, we actually respond to people on screen as if they were real, like they're sitting right there with us. Third, use and gratification. We don't just passively consume media, we choose it. We use it to meet a specific need, whether that's company, distraction, or comfort. And finally, self-determination theory. It comes down to one simple question. Are you scrolling media because you want to, or because you don't know what else to do? Same behavior and completely different meaning. So with all of that in mind, what did we actually want to find out? Simply put, does using screen during meal tell us anything meaningful about how someone feels? We focused on three things: how lonely they are, how well they are doing mentally, and how connected they feel to others. We had three hypotheses, one for each of those outcomes. And honestly, it felt like a reasonable prediction. Most of us would assume screen during meal must have some kind of psychological effect on us. We eat together to connect. So what happens when a screen replaces that connection? That's what we wanted to understand. And that assumption is exactly what we set out to test. So how did we actually go about answering that question? We ran an online study, quantitative correlational, which essentially means that we collected data from a group of people at one point in time and looked for patterns. Were certain digital engagement behavior linked to certain psychological outcomes? We had 109 participants in the end, adults ranging from 18 all the way to 56-year-old. So a real spread of ages. They were recruited through university participant panel and through social media such as Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. No restrictions on gender or nationality. The only real requirement was that you were 18 or over and could complete a survey in English or Welsh language. And the whole thing was done online, which felt fitting given what we were studying. So now, let's talk about the measures that we used for this research. We had 4 measures in total. The first one is something that we actually developed ourselves, because for that measure there is no validated scale that exists in the current literature. We created 9 mealtime behavior items. Out of those 9, 5 were specifically designed to capture digital engagement behavior. Things like making phone call, video call, watching TV, scrolling social media, or playing online games. The reason we embedded those 5 within the broader 9 was simple. We don't want participants to immediately realize that screen use was the focus of this questionnaire. Then we measured the mental well-being, loneliness, social connectedness, each using modified version of established psychological scales. But essentially, 4 measures, 1 survey, and 1 sitting. The study ran entirely through a platform called Psych Toolkit. The link to the study was included directly in the recruitment material. So participants just simply had to click it and they were taken straight in for the study. From there, they worked through a fixed sequence. First, an information sheet, then consent form, then demographics, then items measuring eating habits, then items measuring digital engagement, and then 3 psychological scales: well-being, loneliness, social connectedness, and finally a debrief form. Anyone who indicated that they were under 18 were automatically redirected out of the study at demographic stage. The whole thing took around 30 minutes. Ethically, the study received full approval from Bangor University School of Psychology Sports Science Ethic Committee. Participation was voluntary, everything was completely anonymous, and participants could withdraw at any point before submitting. The debrief also included signposting to well-being support and services. So moving into results, I will be first talking about the characteristics of the sample. I started with 115 participants, out of which 6 were removed. 1 was automatically excluded for being under 18, and the other 5 had selected prefer not to say option for more than half of the questionnaire items. So I treated their response as missing data. That left me with a final sample of 109. The majority were young adults. Over half were aged between 18 and 20, with an overall age range of 18 to 56, and a mean age of 22. In terms of sex, 75% were female, just under 24% were male, and 0.9% chose to self-identify. And in terms of gender identity, 77% identified as women, 21% as men, and 1.8% as non-binary. Let's take a look at the descriptive statistics and understand what the scores across the 3 measures actually mean. As we can see, the mental well-being score is sitting in a mid-range. It means that the participants were neither particularly high nor particularly low in their mental well-being. For loneliness, since the relevant items of UCLA were reverse scored, it means a higher score reflects greater loneliness. The average is moderate to high, so there was a real presence of loneliness within the sample. And for social connectedness, since relevant items of the SCS-R were also reverse scored, it means a higher score reflects greater disconnection. The average suggests a moderate level of social disconnection was there across the sample. All the 3 measures, the standard deviation was relatively small, meaning participants scored fairly consistently and there was not a huge spread between the individuals. And now, let's look at the main findings. I ran Spearman's rank order correlation between each of the 5 digital engagement behaviors and the 3 psychological outcome measures. Spearman was chosen because all variables in this study were measured on ordinal scales. Each digital engagement behavior was also examined individually, as each item represents qualitatively distinct activity during eating. What you can see in the table is that across all 15 correlations, not a single one reaches statistical significance. All p-values are well above 0.05. And all R's values are close to 0, indicating negligible relationship. The relationship here simply is not there. Now, I want to draw your attention to the diagram which is there on the right bottom side. When we look at the intercorrelation between the 3 psychological outcome variables themselves, the picture is quite clear. The more lonely someone feels, the more socially disconnected they are. The more socially disconnected they are, the lower their mental well-being is. All 3 intercorrelations are significant at p less than 0.001. So, what do the results actually mean? In simple language, the results mean using screen during meal does not appear to affect how lonely you feel, how well you are mentally, how connected you feel to others, and at least not in terms of how often you do it. But here's what is interesting. The three psychological variables, loneliness, mental well-being, social connectedness, were strongly linked to each other. So if you are lonely, you are likely to feel more socially disconnected. And if you feel more socially disconnected, your mental well-being tends to suffer. Think about it in this way. Two people both scrolling through their phones during lunch. One is genuinely enjoying it. The other is doing it because eating alone feels too uncomfortable to sit with. Same behavior, completely different story. That is what frequency cannot tell us. And that is why reason behind the behavior matters so much more than the behavior itself. Moving into broader implications. This study challenges the assumption that mealtime screen use is automatically harmful. The data shows no significant link between how often someone uses screen during meals and how lonely, how well, or how connected they feel. For counseling practice, rather than making an assumption about a client's screen use, the more meaningful question is what role that behavior is playing for the particular person and what need it is serving. At public mental health level, rather than focusing on reducing screen time at meals, a more meaningful approach would be helping people develop a more intentional and conscious relationship with their digital habits. Every study has its limitation, and it is very important to acknowledge them with honesty. The first is cross-selection design. Because everything was measured at one point in time, we cannot say whether screen use influences psychological well-being or whether it is the other way around. Causality simply cannot be established here. The second is self-report. Screen use during meals is often automatic and habitual. People may not accurately remember or even notice how often they do it. And loneliness specifically may have been underreported simply because admitting to feeling lonely still carries a lot of social stigma. Third, no validated measure of digital engagement during eating currently exists. The items used in this study were developed specifically for this purpose, which means established reliability and validity figures cannot be applied. And finally, the three psychological scales were modified for this study. While the core content remained intact, the modification means the original reliability and validity figures cannot be directly applied to our version either. Building on those limitations, there are some clear directions for where this research should go next. The most important shift would be measuring why people use screens during meals, not just how often. Understanding the motivation behind behavior would give us a far more meaningful picture than frequency alone ever can. Longitudinal designs would allow us to track people over time and begin to understand whether any relationship exists and in which direction they run. Experience sampling methods. Prompting participants to report their screen use and how they are feeling during or immediately after real meal times would offer a much richer and more realistic account than a retrospective questionnaire. And finally, developing and validating a standardized measure of digital engagement during eating would be genuinely valuable contribution to the field, given that nothing like that currently exists. So, to bring everything together, mealtime screen use is not automatically harmful or helpful. What matters is not how often, but why. Frequency alone cannot tell us whether digital engagement during meals is psychologically meaningful. Two people can do exactly the same thing and experience it in completely different ways. For counselors and researchers alike, the right question to ask is not how much time is this person spending on their phone during meals. It is what need is the screen serving and is it actually being met? Understanding context is the key to meaning, and that is precisely what person-centered counseling practice is built to do. All the references that have been used in this presentation have been listed here. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. I really hope this gives you something to think about the next time you reach for your phone during meal. I'm happy to take any questions, and if anything discussed today has affected you personally, support is available through your GP or the Samaritans on 116 123. Thank you so much.